Okay, good morning, everybody. We are live here in the Hoboken office of NICE. Hopefully, you can see a nice view of the New York skyline behind me. We're going to have a webinar this morning on mastering Teams, unified communications, compliance, recording, and I have two special guests with me, Chad Billing and Falguni Desai. Chad, Falguni, would you like to introduce yourselves quickly?
Sure. Yeah, I'll go first. Hi, everybody. Chad Billing, I'm the senior consultant here at NICE. Looking forward to delivering another one of these fascinating webinars with our good friends at Microsoft. Falguni?
Hi, I'm Falguni Desai. I am a financial services industry advisor working for Microsoft, working with some of the largest financial institutions we have in the United States. And prior to Microsoft, I actually worked in the financial services space at multiple banks and other large fintechs. So pleasure to be here.
That's great. And I think that gives you a special experience, I think, in this space of both the software and the banking world. So that's really interesting. So I guess moving into this and not trying to start off on a massive positive note for Microsoft, but the last quarter, I think we saw, Falguni, Microsoft now have 300 million active users on a daily basis using Teams. I guess without being too loaded a question, what's changed and what's going well with the UC and Microsoft Teams?
So the Teams product, I think, has really evolved and become a mainstay in many of our large clients. Practically all of the large institutions that I talk to or work with are using Teams now. Obviously, with the development of generative AI and other capabilities, we've been able to add some of our Copilot functionality into Teams, especially for those users of Microsoft 365 Copilot. They're able to leverage generative AI in their Teams application and really get a nice ability to see summaries of their calls, see call analytics and things like that. So the product keeps evolving as our wider suite of products keeps evolving. So it's been good to see that happen.
Yeah. And I think from our side, I mean, we see it very much as a much faster deployment to some of the historical legacy UC solutions. I guess, Chad, from your perspective, what are you seeing in the marketplace, and is Teams dominating as much as it sounds like?
Yeah, absolutely. As people know, I've been a big advocate of Teams now for a long time. It's a fantastic unified communication and collaboration platform. So not only does it allow me to engage with people so we can work on joint documents and we can do a whole bunch of things together, but we have seen some challenges with organizations who try to move to this type of UC framework, and they are met with a number of stakeholder requirements around specifically things like compliance assurance. So when you look at the history of these client organizations, traditionally we would have telephony for the front office trade execution. We might have something for mid and back office. We might have something for domestic, something for commercial. And what Teams has done is it's delivered all of this functionality under a single tenant. So from a compliance recording perspective, which is where we're currently sitting, we now tend to see different stakeholder requirements being asked of the same recorder. For example, we all know that in a front office, everything needs to be recorded all of the time. But we are now met with these recording scenarios where people want to be a little bit more selective in what they record. So this could be internal calls or specific meeting subjects, or even an element of user-controlled recording. Click the button to record securely, but above a level of convenience recording. So in a worm-compliant storage, protected, encrypted, secured, and made available upon request. So it's a fantastic platform, but it also means we are now meeting these additional challenges from other stakeholders in the business that traditionally would have been dealt with a different platform.
And are you seeing from an InfoSec security perspective, are things easing up? Is cloud more accepted in the banking trading world, or is it still a big hurdle to entry within getting cloud deployments rolled out?
Well, Guy, I've done, as you know, this job for for quite a while, and I think part of our procurement process is we always try to push out the infosec until at least the very end or once we're in contract, but that simply does not happen anymore. A lot of our client organizations, the first question they ask you is, how is this secured? Where is my data? How do you protect my data? What we're also seeing is regulations come into this effect. So, for example, there's regulations such as DORA, which is placing requirements onto financial entities and their ability to pass these requirements onto third-party ICT providers, or NIS2, which is slightly different, but it's all about the direct regulation of cloud computing in this type of environment. So InfoSec now is the beginning of every single conversation, and I think it takes more time going through InfoSec than it does showing even what a basic demonstration is.
Right. Yes, I think we're all seeing those challenges. Now, just moving back to the hybrid, my personal opinion is Teams was so successful because it not only works in an office, but it works in this hybrid environment we're seeing. And Falguni, I know we've chatted before, and I was adamant hybrid was here to stay. And then I saw an announcement yesterday that 5 or 6 of the largest organizations, including I think it was Microsoft, Amazon, JPMC, and a few others, so across different industries, are going to be mandating 5 days a week in 2025. So that kind of changed the question a little bit. Are you still saying the hybrid environment, or do you think 2025 everyone will be back in the office 5 days a week?
I think what the pandemic taught us is it's really hard to predict the future. So I don't know what will happen in 2025, but I do think, at least what I'm seeing right now, is many institutions are mandating people to come back, if not 5 days, at least 3 days a week. Right. We see that quite across the board, whether you're in a front office role or in any other type of role at a bank. I think for certain roles, it might be 5 days a week. And I think people can, kind of determine whether their role is that type of role where you need to be among your other coworkers. So you might see, I think for traders or others in a trading floor type of role, you're probably going to see that mandated. But I don't know if every role in an institution will be mandated to 5. It could be 3. And let's not forget, even pre-pandemic, people didn't work in an office 100% of the time. There was always some level of hybrid even before 2020.
Right. And I think that's very interesting, right? And I think this is the new way of working, as much as definitely the main trade floor, everyone associated with the main trade floor is probably 5 days a week in most of the organizations we're seeing. But then you've got economists, research analysts, and as the regulations broaden, more people need to be recorded. I guess, Chad, are you seeing a broadening of hybrid working, mobile working, and we can come on to mobile a little bit longer, or do you think that's now the banks are saying, right, we did it because of COVID, and now we're bringing that back in?
Well, I think organizations need to stop being so worried about people working from home aren't going to be regulated and managed as effectively as they are in the office. I think we're well past that now. Being able to find talented employment at a wider range of where the office is has definitely benefited a lot of businesses. But what we've seen and what we've reacted to because of COVID is this ability to provide compliance assurance to your platform, regardless of where you're working. We've seen a huge uptick in mobile voice recording requirements. And I'm going to use my mobile phone probably outside of the office. So this idea that I have to be chained to a desk and remain compliant, I think is absolutely a thing of the past. These compliance assurance technologies, like we have for Teams, like we have for mobile, are there, they're effective, and they really allow organizations to both have this flexibility of the hybrid work while still be able to providing evidential reporting that everything is secure, everything is recorded, we haven't missed anything. We've even done daily health checks regardless of where that employee is.
And I guess that brings us nicely onto mobile. There's no escaping. It's got to be part of a bank's portfolio now. People have got to be able to work remotely. I guess from your perspective, Chad, all the fines we see on record keeping seem to be around mobile. I guess what's kind of going wrong, and why are the banks getting so badly fined on these things?
I mean, I've talked about this in length with both regulators, CCOs, legal counsels, and I think part of the problem is managing individuals. We want to be able to provide the ability to communicate, and that ability to communicate in a regulated manner. But let's be realistic for a second here. If people want to do something inappropriately, they're going to do it. Water always finds a way. So one of the ways we find to help with these types of scenarios isn't just the technology level capability of being able to record mobile phones or WhatsApps or whatever it is, but it's having a surveillance view on that end-to-end trade reconstruction, because gaps within the reconstruction are as telling as the words of themselves. How did you, Guy, the trader, go from position A to position B with no communication with your customer? And those gaps can be effectively used to identify off-channel communication as well.
And I guess, Falguni, from your perspective, and again, I keep giving you easy softball questions. Mobile's easy with Microsoft Teams, right? It's built into the product naturally.
It is. Mobile is available there. It's a great convenience to our users. We see a lot of adoption of obviously mobile Teams, but I think, aside from the software being available on a mobile phone, one of the things that I've noticed at some of the banks and even the institutions that I worked at is that because people have so many applications available on their mobile phone, some banks are still requiring that the people working on the trading floor not have their mobile phone at their desk. They're not allowed to use it on the trading floor, whether it's a work phone or even a personal mobile phone. They're supposed to lock it up in a locker. And so we do see this type of mandate in certain institutions, which I think is interesting. But even with that, I think what Chad said is really true, because if people walk out for lunch and they take their phone with them, you really can't control what that person is going to use that phone for. And exactly. If somebody is intent on doing something that is outside the confines of the regulation, I've seen this before when I worked in a fraud practice. People find a way to do things and still kind of play by the rules, the surface level rules, if you will, and they figure out ways to do things, hoping nobody will catch them. So I think it's interesting. Banks still do have a challenge in terms of compliance, even after the technology catches up. People's behaviors adjust to sometimes work outside of the technology's, the technology structure.
I couldn't agree more. And as I said, people use these platforms not because they're good platforms to use. I'm going to use these platforms because I don't want you seeing what I'm going to say. And yes, we can implement type A recording for a mobile UC, but then I'll just go to something else, or Discord or LinkedIn or whatever it is. So we're forever going to be chasing this kind of technological strategy, when actually what we're trying to do is we're trying to identify the off channel. So for me, these conversations now between records management and communication surveillance, seeing what was said and what was hid, or the lack of what was said, is more integral than ever, and making sure that what we feed into that surveillance solution and how that surveillance solution proactively identifies the misconduct is the most important thing, because these regulations are here. We're not dealing with new regulations, we're dealing with more enforcement.
And that's a great segue to I guess the quality of data. And chatting to a lot of the large banks, the biggest issue I see in a lot of these banks is the issue of dark data. People have all this data in the bank and they can't use it, or it's of poor quality. I guess, Chad, from your perspective, what are you seeing on the emphasis of the checks and balances around the quality of data and moving that data between systems?
So I don't think there should be a record management solution in the land that shouldn't have an element of checks and balances. It's very easy to be able to, first of all, proactively identify that everything that should be working is working. We've got the tools have been in these products for a long time. Additionally, it's very easy to look at a reconciliation between what you should have captured and what you've actually captured. But again, that only tells part of the story. When you look at how we provide the data through the end-to-end flow and resources, a full end-to-end reconciliation is of course incredibly important. And this is where some of the challenges come in, I think, by picking and choosing different products to build your own ecosystem, because you're never fully assured that everything is working together and reconciling together as a unified platform. The problem with surveillance is it's only as good as the data that you put into it. So if the data going in isn't complete, isn't whole, isn't of good quality, then you're going to find it incredibly difficult to make sure that you're not triggering false alerts or, chasing, what potentially be inappropriate behavior, but actually the system's just got slightly confused.
Yeah. And I guess, Falguni, from your perspective, and we love it as a vendor, but Microsoft seems to have a nice open policy of API integration, albeit secure, but trying to move the data that sits within Microsoft and partner systems between different systems within Azure. Is that a fair statement?
It is. I think sometimes we still do see that challenge of banks wanting to perhaps keep certain things on-prem. Sometimes they're not as comfortable taking all of their data into the cloud. But I think we're starting to get over that hump. We still have institutions that would like to keep certain channels on-prem, or maybe they're just not ready to put everything on the cloud. And so I think it then creates this issue, like Chad was saying, where you might have data that is not complete all in one place. They may have it complete in the bank's ecosystem, but it's not sitting in the same data lakes, it's not sitting in the same places, and therefore it becomes harder to stitch it up together and get a full picture. I think that's where we need to spend some time giving people the comfort of, moving to the cloud, moving everything to the cloud, that this will create far more efficiencies than it will, sort of fears. And I think we still sometimes have to have that conversation.
Right. And I think from what we're seeing in Chad, I'll throw it back over to you. I mean, while it's, I would say, near impossible for every bank to centralize everything, we're seeing a consolidation, are we, of centralization, especially in the record keeping and the archive management. I know I was chatting to one bank the other day. They had, I think, 54 different storages for their mobile device capture in every country. Are you seeing trying to grab hold of this data, centralize it, and have a better handle on managing that as part of this process?
I mean, I think it's going to be difficult to centralize everything. We live in a global world, and what might be right for North America is going to be different for EU, going to be different for UK, for Switzerland, for Singapore, for Korea. So we have to also be mindful about what some of these global challenges are. But if you look at the element of centralization from an integration perspective, then yes, I think companies are going to benefit a lot more. Compliance data sits across pretty much everything in the business, from people to market data, to execution data, to communication data. So being able to utilize that data in a more meaningful way rather than operating in a more fractured way is going to absolutely deliver many, many more advantages against the organizations who are still thinking monolithically about, I've got to have this over there and that over there, and nothing can connect.
Yeah. And I think just adding on to that, the point you touched on earlier, that then once you've got that data, it now comes down to the sentiment of that data as well as having the data itself, right? So having tools that say, these are the words, but what do they really mean? Are you seeing a bigger emphasis on the sentiment of that data analysis as well?
Yeah, but and again, it comes down to the individual organization. Different organizations look for different things, and when you start to get into the surveillance world, this is where the kind of the boots on the ground, working with the technology office and the compliance office to make sure that whilst we've got de facto standard approaches to surveillance tools within the product, how do we customize this to be right for your business? Because what you might say and do and you think is positive might be different to the peers with kind of within your industry as well. And then that topic takes you down a very interesting route with things like AI, predictive and generative, and the roles that those technologies have within this kind of data as well.
Yeah, and that's again nice segue into our last topic with a couple of minutes to go here. Falguni, I guess AI is everywhere, right? And I know you mentioned it earlier. I guess what's Microsoft's sort of broad brush approach to how AI is going to influence your suite of products moving forward?
Well, I think we see the Copilot capability entering a lot of our traditional applications, right? So we have obviously Copilot for M365, which includes an element of AI in Teams. But I also think we're going to see this capability evolve into many other applications, whether it's for somebody working, in a service capability, in a trading capability, if they're working in a security role even. So we have co-pilots for all of these different personas and functions. I do think, though, that we have to be mindful, and I say this as somebody working for a big tech company, I do think we have to be mindful that AI is not an answer to everything. And I think we still need to think about what are the cultures, what are the kind of behaviors, what do we expect of people in different roles? Because like we talked about before, technology can definitely give you all the data, it can give you all the surveillance. But if people are intent on doing something, they will find ways to kind of black out or leave the technology or try to do something offline. The other point I want to make about AI, though, is that one of the things we've seen kind of take hold, even with something as basic as the M365 Copilot, is that people are now beginning to see the sort of the vast capability of using AI to find things faster, right? And I think that speed and that ability to do your analysis, to search for things, to maybe even see things called out that you had not noticed before in calls, to look for sentiment analysis right away. I think AI just gives that ability for somebody to do their job faster. If you're in that surveillance function, if you're in a compliance function, the speed at which you can do your work is going to improve vastly. And I think that's something that a lot of institutions are going to benefit from greatly. They don't have to wait for days. It's not a manual effort anymore.
Yeah, and Chad, I guess in what you're seeing, and obviously the nice suite of products for a quick plug, a lot of AI, a lot of machine learning algorithms, trying to make sure that again the sentiment, the intent, things like emojis. Does that mean good trade with a thumbs down or something like that? Is that the next evolution of trying to spot, some of the issues within the banks?
Yeah, again, there's been many conversations with many different people about the role that AI has within compliance. I think this idea of augmentation to the role is important. So, for example, if you look at the news recently, they're using AI to try to solve the cocktail party problem. Now, how would that apply within our world? Well, we do mixed audio on speakers. 8-into-1 speaker channels means I've got a cocktail party problem on a regulated use of recording. And can I use this technology to go back in time to kind of separate that? So I think from a use case perspective, we employ this and have employed, AI has been around since the 50s. We employ this technology to make things better. We employ this technology to be able to react to changes and implement those changes. Going forward, the direct use for compliance, I think you're right, Falguni. It's all about empowering the individual, not to take away the individual, but very much about how can we help them spot things quicker, do things more, be able to deal with more alert requests and so on. So it's going to be an empowerment. And I'm sure Microsoft, you're seeing that as well. That's why you're doing things like Copilot. It's called Copilot for a reason, because you've still got the squidgy person in the seat doing the job.
That's right. And one more thing I would add to this, especially because you mentioned emojis. One of the things that I have observed at some of my clients is that having a few more bells and whistles in your communication channel, like the ability to put in gifs or emojis or other capabilities. In some cases, what we're seeing is banks asking us to turn those capabilities off, because in some cases, having more content like that, the ability to use emojis could actually create a more nebulous situation for somebody surveilling that. You may not know what the intent of an emoji is, or it may be misinterpreted by somebody. And so we're seeing some institutions pulling back from turning on that capability. They just say, turn the emojis off. We don't want our traders or people in the front office to be using this. And so again, it goes back to my point. Technology is great, but sometimes having too much capability actually creates a little bit of confusion.
No, absolutely. You just triggered something about, I'm trying to think about some of the emojis cross country as well, different countries and different emojis that could play havoc on
very different things.
Yes, exactly. Well, listen, I think we got like two minutes left. So I just wanted to give you the opportunity, I guess, 2025 and beyond, Falguni, what do you think is happening? What's the direction of the industry? What do you think we're going to see in the next sort of, 1 to 5 years?
What I would say is, in the last 2 years, what I have observed is the numerous fines that institutions have had to pay out on their record keeping. We still see these stories coming out almost on a monthly basis. And so I think the regulators, at least in the United States, have put a very harsh enforcement on the record keeping. And so I think the entire industry is now having to look at their tooling, look at all of their communications channels, think about their surveillance platforms. How do they modernize faster? How do they stay compliant? Because the fines that we've seen in the last 2 years, they've reached over $2 billion. And so what I foresee happening in the next year is that there's going to be a lot more focus on this. And I think technology teams, compliance teams in these areas of the banks are going to have to sort of, step up and do a lot more modernization. That's what I would predict.
Yeah. And Chad, final thoughts?
Yeah, modernization. I think if we look at the challenges that our customers are facing, I'm going to take a phrase that you used earlier about this idea of centralization, but I don't mean about putting all data in one country. I mean having a system of record for voice comms, UC comms, e-comms, surveillance, and making it all kind of work together. As we're being dealt more and more technology challenges, as our stakeholders are driving us to more and more integrations, I think this element of standardization across voice and e-coms and surveillance, making it easy for people to understand, implement, and use is going to be critical to 25 and beyond.
Yeah, and just building, I think you're right. The centralization is a utopian dream, but it's the amount of silos, right? So reducing the silos, getting that dark data up, and being able to use that data throughout a bank. I couldn't agree more. And like I said, that's the word I think of 2025 is less silos is what I'm hearing.
Less silos, and APIs are key. APIs are absolutely key.
Exactly. Okay, well, I think we're up on time now. Falguni, Chad, thank you so much for your discussions, and it's been a pleasure, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Falguni.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks. Bye.